Jamie's mascara streaks down her cheeks as her breath trembles against the dim hush of the restaurant. Wallace leans in close enough that she can smell the bitterness of his wine. His grip tightens on her forearm until the skin pales beneath his fingers. His voice is low and clenched, sharpened by anger he does not bother to hide. You humiliated me. When we get home, you're finished. If you're enjoying this story, go on and hit subscribe button. It keeps the family growing and guarantees you don't miss the next move. Turn on notifications, you'll want to know when the next tale drops. Silverware clinks from nearby tables. Linen napkins shift. Conversations halt in stiff discomfort. Diners avoid looking at the scene unfolding, their attention retreating behind the safety of polite silence. All except one. At the next table, a man in a fitted black suit lifts his gaze. Tattoos curl up his neck and wind across the backs of his hands. His expression does not carry surprise. It carries interest. His posture remains still, composed, as if he has long practiced the art of watching without interfering. Jamie feels the weight of his attention before she can even look his way. She sits trapped in a dress Wallace chose for her earlier that evening, a delicate silver piece he claimed matched his image. Her makeup is elegant, or at least it was before her brief escape to the restroom where she cried in quiet frustration. The smudges at the corners of her eyes feel like stains she can no longer hide. Wallace sits upright across from her, polished and fit, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms that flex with possessive pressure. His hair is slicked back with meticulous care. The neatness of his appearance stands in cruel contrast to the chaos simmering beneath his skin. His hand remains locked around her arm, his thumb pressing just hard enough to bruise later, without being obvious now. The restaurant around them is an elegant cage. Soft lighting glows from overhead fixtures, casting warm pools of light that reflect against polished wine glasses. White tablecloths drape over every table like quiet reminders that this is a place where problems are meant to be hidden behind etiquette. Servers glide past with practiced smiles, each one pretending they do not hear the words being hissed across the table. This has always been the way things go. The world looks away. Jamie swallows the familiar ache of resignation. Wallace's voice hardens. You could not follow a simple direction. All you had to do was answer the hostess politely. Yet you made us look foolish. Jamie lowers her gaze. She remembers the moment clearly. The hostess had asked if she preferred a booth or a table, a harmless question that caught her off guard. She hesitated, unsure what Wallace wanted her to say. He claimed she should have known. He claimed she embarrassed him. As always, she found herself apologizing before she even understood what she had done wrong. Wallace releases her arm long enough to adjust his fork, then grips her again beneath the table. It is a small movement, but full of practiced control. He decides what she orders, how she sits, when she smiles. Tonight is no different. His commands arrive in quiet corrections. Sit straighter. Keep your voice down. Do not look around so much. Jamie obeys out of habit. Disobedience has never ended well. She feels eyes on her again, steady and heavy. She turns slightly, only for a second, and meets the gaze of the tattooed man at the next table. He does not look away. His broad shoulders are set in a relaxed position, hands resting near the stem of his untouched wine glass. His dark attire blends into the low lighting, but the ink on his skin catches the candlelight. He watches with a calm that borders on unsettling. It is not curiosity. It is focus. She does not know who he is, but something about him feels dangerous in a way that commands respect instead of fear. His presence cuts through the tension like a silent warning. Wallace does not notice him. Wallace notices no one but himself. Look at me when I am speaking, he snaps. Jamie lifts her head. Her throat tightens as she tries to compose herself. I am sorry, she whispers. Sorry does not fix stupidity. His jaw flexes. I am tired of your mistakes. The words sink into her skin with the familiarity of old wounds. They carry more weight than the threat in his earlier whisper. She feels her heartbeat rise as memories resurface. Incidents that left no visible marks, only bruises buried under long sleeves and careful smiles. She learned to hide the strain, to convince herself that things would eventually settle, that he only spoke out of frustration. It was easier than confronting the truth. Tonight, however, his anger feels different. Louder, sharper, more public. The diners around them continue pretending they do not hear. It is easier to ignore than acknowledge a scene that does not belong in a restaurant with velvet chairs and expensive wine lists. Politeness shields everyone except the one enduring the storm. Jamie clenches her hands in her lap. Her breathing grows unsteady, but she forces her voice to remain even. I really did not mean to upset you. You exist to upset me at this point. Wallace shakes his head with disappointment that feels rehearsed. You should be grateful I tolerate it. Her stomach twists. She wishes she could disappear into the candlelight. She wishes she could slip into the shadows where people like her could breathe without waiting for the next strike of disapproval. Then she feels it again. That gaze. Strong. Steady. Unafraid. The man in the dark suit has not shifted. His attention remains locked on the exchange, as if each word from Wallace reveals something he wants to memorize. His expression carries no sympathy, no pity. It is something else. Something almost analytical. Jamie cannot tell if he is judging Wallace or studying her. She looks away quickly. Wallace digs his fingers into her arm again, leaning close enough for his breath to brush her cheek. When we get home, he mutters, I will remind you how to behave. The threat is enough to make her flinch. It is loud enough for several tables to hear. A nearby couple stiffens. Another diner clears his throat. Still, no one interferes. They all wait for the moment to pass, expecting Jamie to smooth things over with a soft apology. But she cannot. Not this time. She feels the weight of the tattooed man's stare once more. She lifts her gaze and meets his eyes. For a heartbeat, time stills. His expression does not soften. It intensifies. Something electric moves through his eyes. Not anger, not sympathy. Recognition. It is as if he sees the truth she has tried so long to hide. Wallace keeps his hold on her and whispers another harsh warning, the kind that promises consequences long after the night ends. Jamie does not look away from the man in the black suit. And for the first time in a long time, Wallace is not the only one watching. Jamie does not know it yet, but everything shifts in that single moment. Jamie's breath catches as Wallace's warning settles between them. The restaurant noise resumes around their table, but everything inside her feels suspended in that single moment. Her gaze is still locked with the man in the dark suit. His expression remains steady, unreadable, as if he is measuring every detail of what he has witnessed. He finally looks away, not dismissing her, but shifting his attention to the server approaching his table. Franklin Russo orders his food with a quiet certainty, his tone smooth and level. He does not glance at the menu. He does not glance at the server. His eyes remain on Wallace, following every movement, as if committing them to memory. The waiter nods quickly and retreats, unsettled by the intensity of a man who has not raised his voice yet carries the weight of someone who rarely needs to. Jamie wipes her cheek, trying to compose herself. She hopes the moment will pass, that Wallace will calm down long enough to get through the rest of the evening without further humiliation. But his grip tightens again, an impatient tug that forces her to stand. We are talking elsewhere, he mutters. Jamie's stomach sinks. She knows that tone far too well. Wallace guides her toward the hallway near the restrooms, a narrow space dimly lit with wall sconces and soft carpet. Her heels tap quietly against the floor, her steps unsteady. She keeps her head lowered. She does not want anyone watching her leave the table. She does not want to give the impression that she cannot control her own life. She does not notice Franklin rising. Not at first. He stands with the same controlled movement he used earlier, pushing his chair back without a sound. His shoulders square as he follows at a slow, purposeful pace. His expression remains calm, but his eyes hold something far more deliberate. Those who know Franklin Russo know that his silence is never passive. He is a man whose authority is earned through decades of precise restraint. People fear him not because he is loud, but because he never acts without intention. Rumors follow him like shadows. Some say he once ended a conflict in a boardroom without raising his voice. Others whisper that he has no tolerance for cruelty. He is known for discipline and feared for what he chooses not to say out loud. Tonight, he says nothing as he moves through the restaurant. Jamie feels Wallace's anger radiating beside her. He pulls her into the hallway and steps in front of her, blocking her path. His voice drops into a tone that coils tight with frustration. "You think people feel sorry for you in there?" he spits. "Nobody cares. They just want us gone so they can enjoy their food." Jamie nods quickly, her breath shallow. If she agrees, maybe he will let her go back to the table. Maybe he will avoid turning this into something worse at home. "I am trying," she whispers. "Try harder." He steps closer, trapping her in the narrow corridor. She feels the familiar panic rise, cold and suffocating. She grips her hands to stop them from shaking, praying no one steps in. Interference always leads to consequences. Private consequences. Her fear clouds her visions so deeply that she does not realize someone has approached until the air shifts beside them. Wallace turns slightly, annoyed at the intrusion. Franklin stands a few feet away. His presence is not loud. It does not need to be. The hallway feels smaller with him in it. His expression is calm but unyielding, eyes trained on Wallace with the attention of someone who has already decided exactly how this ends. A server, carrying a tray of drinks, pauses behind Franklin. He looks torn, unsure whether to intervene or get help. One glance at Franklin's tattooed hands and collected posture is enough to make him step aside instead. Franklin's voice, when it finally emerges, is low enough to keep the situation from turning into a spectacle. There is no aggression in it, only certainty, the kind that makes Wallace still. "Someone cares," Franklin says. The words land with quiet force. They contradict everything Wallace just told Jamie. They cut through his attempt at control with surgical precision. Wallace stiffens. Confusion flashes across his face. He straightens, trying to regain the dominance he usually wears like a second skin. "This is private," he snaps. Franklin does not move. That is not what it looked like. Wallace bristles at the challenge. He is not used to strangers interfering, especially strangers who speak with such steady confidence. He studies Franklin for a moment, eyes drifting to the tattoos on his hands, the composed posture, the guarded stillness. Something unspoken flickers in Wallace's expression, a mix of annoyance and unease. "Mind your business," Wallace mutters, forcing a laugh as if he has the upper hand. Franklin does not laugh. He does not blink. He simply holds Wallace's gaze with a patience that feels like a warning. For a brief moment, the hallway is silent. Jamie feels the tension coiling between the two men. She wants to disappear. She wants Wallace to walk away before this becomes something she cannot undo. Wallace lets out a scoff, dismissing Franklin with a wave of his hand. "You do not know us. Stay out of this." Franklin's response is a small shift in his expression, almost imperceptible. A decision settling into place. Without another word, he turns and walks back toward the dining area. His pace is calm, unhurried, as if he has already taken from the moment what he needed to. Jamie watches him leave, her pulse thudding in her ears. Wallace grabs her arm again, but she barely registers the pressure. Her mind is still on the stranger who stepped in without raising his voice. Franklin returns to his table, lowering himself into his seat with thoughtful precision. His fingers rest lightly against the stem of his wine glass, though he does not lift it. His attention stays on the hallway, calm and calculating. He has already made a decision. Jamie does not notice the look he gives Wallace as she is dragged back toward their table. But Franklin notices everything. And he is not finished. Wallace's grip on Jamie's forearm is iron as he steers her out of the restaurant. The cool evening air hits her face, but it does little to steady the trembling in her hands. She follows silently, heels clicking against the pavement, each step a familiar rhythm of fear she has known too well. Around them, the city hums, oblivious to the storm contained in this narrow corridor between the restaurant and their car. Her mind drifts unbidden to the past, the lessons Wallace taught under the guise of guidance. The times she had been forced to apologize for imagined mistakes. the nights spent explaining herself only to hear his sharp voice echo through the apartment. How carefully she had learned to anticipate his temper, how she had learned to make herself small, quiet, invisible. Every memory coils in her stomach, leaving her breath shallow. Wallace yanks open the car door for her, his hand still tight around her wrist. She hesitates only briefly before sliding into the seat. The door slams, the sound reverberating in the confined space. He slides in beside her, adjusting the mirrors, the seat, everything in perfect order as if controlling the environment could channel his rage. "You were staring at him too long," he mutters, his jaw tight. "That man at the next table. Who does he think he is, looking at you that way?" Jamie keeps her eyes on the seat in front of her, nodding slowly. Any argument would fuel the fire she is already too familiar with. She imagines herself invisible, a shadow trapped in the passenger seat. "You humiliated me," he continues, voice low and even, like a teacher marking a student for failure. "And I will not forget it. Not now. Not ever. You will learn how to behave." She swallows against the panic rising in her throat. Escape crosses her mind, the fleeting possibility of running, disappearing into the night. She remembers the times she tried before, how quickly he found her, how the punishment came afterward. The idea dies as quickly as it forms. The fear, ingrained and sharp, keeps her still. The car lurches as Wallace swerves aggressively, cutting across lanes with reckless disregard for the city around them. Taillights streak past the windows. Jamie presses her palms to her knees, hoping her pulse does not betray her. The ride home has always been part of the ritual. The threats, the warnings, the controlled fury that rises behind a mask of composure. "You think you can hide your mistakes," Wallace says, his eyes narrowing as he grips the steering wheel. "But you cannot. Not from me. Not from anyone who matters." Jamie nods again, silent. Her body wants to tremble, but she forces herself to remain composed, focusing on the distant hum of traffic. Each red light feels like a countdown, each turn a reminder that once they arrive, the confrontation will resume. The familiar building looms ahead. The apartment complex looks harmless from the outside, but Jamie knows better. Every door she has passed tonight has led her into a carefully controlled space. A space where mistakes are punished and freedom is measured in how well she conforms. Wallace locks the door behind them once they enter, the sound echoing in the small foyer. The click is more than security. It is a statement. His control is complete. She stands still for a moment, feeling the walls close around her, the quiet suffocating in its familiarity. He steps closer, forcing her toward the living room. His voice lowers, words deliberate and slow. "When I say we talk, you listen. You do not interrupt. You do not move. You understand me?" Jamie swallows, nodding once. She knows what this means. The pattern has always been the same. He corners her, pressing her against walls, escalating his voice, measuring every response. The confrontation begins gently, like the first note of a melody, and ends with her apologizing for things she never did. Tonight feels different, though she cannot say why. Perhaps it is the remnants of the stranger's gaze in the restaurant. Perhaps it is the knowledge that someone else has already seen the truth of her life. Wallace continues, circling her like a predator, marking territory. "You have no right to defy me."
None.
"And yet you do it anyway." His hand grazes her shoulder, a warning rather than a touch. "You will learn. You always do." Jamie's chest tightens. She feels trapped, every nerve screaming. She wants to speak, to argue, but the words choke in her throat. Every previous attempt has led to harsher lessons, and she knows this is no different. Then it happens. A knock. One sharp rap on the apartment door. Wallace freezes. His body stiffens, the air between them suddenly electric with uncertainty. He lifts his head, listening, frowning as if the sound is impossible. Jamie's heart jumps into her throat. Her breath catches. She glances toward the door, and for the first time, a flicker of hope pierces the familiar fog of fear. Another knock, louder this time. It is measured, confident, deliberate. Wallace moves toward the door cautiously, every motion betraying a rare hesitation. Jamie feels her stomach twist. She hesitates before moving, not sure if she should peek. The old instinct tells her to hide, to shrink, to vanish into the shadows of the room. But there's a pull, subtle and inexplicable. Wallace opens the door just slightly, and the hallway beyond is revealed. A familiar figure stands there. Franklin Russo. He does not look surprised or uncertain. He looks like he belongs there, like he has been expecting this moment. His dark, calculating eyes meet Jamie's and hold her attention for the briefest heartbeat. Wallace blinks. For the first time that evening, his control falters. His polished composure wavers under Franklin's steady presence. Jamie feels her pulse spike, a mixture of fear and relief. The man from the restaurant is here. The one who had seen everything, who had watched quietly, who had judged without speaking. He stands in the hallway as if he owns it, though he does not move an inch closer. Wallace opens his mouth, but no words come. His usual threats die on his tongue. Jamie swallows and finally dares to lift her chin, meeting Franklin's gaze. The tension in the room tightens further, but it is different now. It is not the suffocating, familiar fear. It is an edge of possibility. Someone else is here. Someone else is watching. Wallace glances between the two of them. He does not know it yet, but the dynamic has shifted. Jamie's breath catches. Her chest rises and falls rapidly. The world outside their apartment, so long shut away, seems to hover just beyond the door. Franklin's presence promises that tonight may end differently. That perhaps, for the first time in years, she will not face the consequences alone. She takes a tentative step toward the doorway, eyes never leaving Franklin's. And in that silent, electric moment, everything begins to change. Wallace's hand hovers over the door, the polished wood pressed against his palm, a silent barrier between Jamie and the world outside. He glances at Franklin, eyes narrowing with suspicion and anger. For the first time, the control he wields so effortlessly wavers, though he masks it with a growl. Franklin's voice is calm, deliberate and precise. "I came to return something she dropped." Wallace's brows knit together. His first instinct is to slam the door shut, to reclaim dominance with a gesture. He lunges forward, hand slamming against the frame, but Franklin moves with a grace that is both fluid and authoritative. He intercepts, his body solid, blocking the door without needing force. His dark eyes lock onto Wallace's with quiet dominance. "You should not follow her," Wallace spits, trying to regain control. His tone is defensive, but the tension beneath it is audible. "Why are you here? Who are you?" Franklin tilts his head, expression unmoved. "I am here because you crossed a line. You made threats in public. You humiliated her in front of strangers. You are wrong to think no one cares." Wallace blinks. The words hang heavy in the air. He had assumed his actions inside the restaurant would go unnoticed, that anyone observing would remain passive. Yet Franklin repeats his threat, word for word, leaving no room for denial. Jamie watches, wide-eyed, as her fiancé's composure falters. The polished mask he wears so carefully cracks in subtle but unmistakable ways. For the first time, she sees hesitation, a glimpse of the man behind the act, the one who thrives on fear yet is vulnerable when faced with someone who refuses to be intimidated. Franklin's tone shifts slightly, still measured but carrying an edge that warns without threatening. "You need to step aside, so she can leave." Wallace's hand tightens into a fist. "She will not go anywhere with you. She is mine. She belongs to me." Jamie hesitates, torn. Her instincts scream to obey Wallace, to stay safe, to avoid the storm. But another part, buried beneath years of fear, senses that Franklin's presence is different. There is authority in him that does not seek to dominate, only to correct the imbalance. His calm strength contrasts sharply with Wallace's volatile control. Taking a slow breath, Jamie steps toward Franklin, her gaze flicking between the two men. Wallace lunges suddenly, his anger flaring as he tries to assert power, but Franklin shifts, guiding him with a subtle movement that redirects the force without violence. Wallace stumbles slightly, thrown by the precision of Franklin's intervention. Jamie's heart pounds as she moves past Wallace, who hesitates, fury and disbelief battling in his expression. Franklin does not let her go. His hand rests lightly on her elbow, guiding her with quiet assurance, not force. "You are safe," Franklin says softly, his voice carrying reassurance Jamie has not felt in years. "Come with me." Wallace's shouts fill the apartment, demands and threats clashing with the calm authority in Franklin's words. But Franklin does not respond with anger. He simply blocks, guides, and waits, letting Wallace's frustration lose momentum in the face of controlled precision. Jamie follows, stepping out into the hallway, her pulse racing but her body lighter than it has been in months. The city noises beyond the apartment door feel strangely distant, yet promising. For the first time, she feels the possibility of choice, of escape, of autonomy. Wallace pounds on the door once more, but Franklin positions himself between them, his stance unyielding, his presence enough to keep the man at bay. Jamie glances at him, a flicker of gratitude and awe passing through her. He does not speak unnecessarily. He does not overstate his power. He simply exists as the barrier between her and the fear she has known for too long. Once they reach the car, Franklin opens the door and gestures for her to enter. Jamie moves carefully, her hands still trembling, but there is relief behind every step. The tension of the apartment, of Wallace's presence, fades slightly with each step away. Franklin closes the door behind them and returns to the driver's seat. His eyes remain alert, scanning their surroundings with careful precision. There is no need for words between them yet. His quiet competence reassures Jamie in ways she cannot immediately articulate. As the car pulls away, leaving the apartment building behind, Jamie exhales deeply. She leans back, watching the city lights pass by in a blur. For the first time in years, she allows herself to believe that she might be free, that she might finally breathe without anticipating the next moment of fear. Franklin glances at her briefly, his dark eyes assessing but not intrusive. "You are not going back tonight," he says simply. "And you will not be alone again." Jamie nods, swallowing the lump in her throat. His words feel like a promise, a shield she has longed for but never dared to hope for. The car moves through the quiet streets. Each turn, each stop, carries them further from Wallace and closer to a reality Jamie has not yet fully imagined. She cannot see what awaits, but for the first time, she senses that someone is watching out for her, someone whose presence turns fear into possibility. And in the back of her mind, the thought lingers. Maybe, just maybe, this is the beginning of a life she can claim for herself. The car turned down a narrow, unmarked street, the city lights fading behind them. Jamie's hands remained folded in her lap, fingers intertwined, though her pulse refused to slow. She had escaped the immediate threat, but the weight of everything she had endured still clung to her. Every glance at Franklin's composed face reminded her that her life had shifted in ways she could barely comprehend. They arrived at a tall, nondescript building. The door slid open silently before they reached it. Inside, the hallways were clean, almost sterile, but there was an underlying tension in the air, a sense that security was not just for show. Franklin guided her through the quiet corridors with the same calm authority he had displayed in the apartment hallway. "This way," he said, opening another door that led into a small, warmly lit suite. "You can stay here tonight. We will discuss what comes next later." Jamie hesitated, her eyes scanning the room. The furniture was minimal but comfortable. Curtains were drawn against the street outside. Cameras and discreet sensors hinted at a level of protection she had never imagined. She swallowed, the reality of safety pressing down on her like something foreign and fragile. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly, almost under her breath. Franklin's gaze softened just slightly. "Because I do not tolerate cruelty. Because someone needed to be here tonight." His voice was calm, but there was no room for argument. It was a simple statement of fact, not an invitation for thanks. Jamie nodded, unsure if she was supposed to respond. She moved toward the bathroom and shut the door, finally allowing herself to look in a mirror that did not reflect the carefully maintained image Wallace had imposed on her. Her makeup was smeared, her skin pale from tension, but for the first time in a long time, her reflection felt real. She washed her face, letting the water strip away the remnants of fear, the makeup, and the humiliation that had clung to her all evening. When she emerged, Franklin was sitting on the edge of a chair, hands folded, watching without intruding. His presence was constant, but not overbearing. He gave her space, yet she felt the safety in the quiet vigilance. In all her life, no one had offered her room to breathe while also standing firm, watching. "I need to know something," Jamie said cautiously, perching on the edge of the bed. Her voice was small but steady. "Who are you, really?" Franklin tilted his head, considering the question. "Enough to make sure you are safe. Enough to stop him if necessary. The rest is not your concern right now." Jamie frowned, frustration and curiosity mixing. "That does not tell me anything." He smiled faintly, a shadow of amusement in his eyes. "You will know what you need to know when it matters. For now, trust that I will finish what I start." His words lingered in the room, heavy and certain. The weight of them struck Jamie differently than any promise she had received from Wallace. She had never known someone to speak with such authority without expecting obedience, without using fear as leverage. Her phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the fragile calm. She froze, dread curling through her chest. A text. Wallace. Her hands shook as she read it. Threats, escalation, a clear reminder that he would not let her go without a fight. She looked up at Franklin, her voice trembling. "He knows where I am." Franklin's expression did not change. "He will not reach you. Not tonight. Not ever." She wanted to ask how he could be so sure, wanted to press for details, but the firmness in his gaze stopped her. There was no room for debate, only the quiet assertion that she would not be returning to him. Not now. Not ever. For the first time, the truth of it began to sink in. She did not have to go back. She could step into a life where fear did not dictate every decision. Jamie sank onto the edge of the bed, finally exhaling a breath she did not know she had been holding. Franklin remained standing near the doorway, a quiet sentinel. He did not rush her, did not crowd her. He offered presence instead of pressure. Minutes passed in a tense calm. Jamie felt her body begin to relax, just slightly, as she realized that she could exist in this room without constantly anticipating the next strike, the next verbal lashing. She could breathe even if only for a moment. Finally, she looked at him again. "I do not know if I can trust anyone, but I have no choice right now. I cannot go back." Franklin inclined his head, understanding. "Then trust the fact that I will make sure you do not have to." It was not a comforting phrase. It was a promise backed by something deeper, something unspoken in his stillness, in the precision of his movements, in the quiet authority he carried. Jamie realized she could feel it. She could believe it. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Wallace, and she felt the chill of fear creep back, but it was different now. This time, there was a barrier between her and the threat. This time, she was not alone. Franklin moved to the small desk by the window, scanning the screen on a device she could not identify. "He will not reach you. He will not get to you. Not tonight." Jamie nodded, finally letting herself sink back against the pillows, exhausted but alive in a way she had not felt in years. The storm outside her small, guarded sanctuary continued, but inside, for now, she was protected. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that protection might last. That she might survive the night and every night after it, no longer caged by fear, but under the watch of someone who saw the truth and refused to let it continue. Her eyes drifted toward Franklin. He was still watching, but he did not push, did not demand. His presence alone carried the weight of certainty, of control, of power used with purpose rather than cruelty. Jamie closed her eyes for a moment, just long enough to let herself imagine a life where she could breathe, where she could choose, where she could exist beyond the walls Wallace had built around her. And in that small, fleeting moment, hope returned. Wallace stormed back into the restaurant the next afternoon, his polished appearance slightly disheveled. His eyes darted across the dimly lit room, scanning for anything that might lead him to the man who had interfered the night before. He demanded the manager provide the security footage immediately. His voice carried that controlled authority he had perfected over the years, but there was an edge of desperation in it that he could not hide. The manager hesitated, shuffling nervously behind the counter. "Sir, the footage. We need proper authorization." "Authorization?" Wallace snapped. "Do you not understand the situation? Someone interfered with my fiancé last night. I need every frame of the video. Now." The manager swallowed hard and glanced toward the waitstaff. Murmurs spread across the floor as staff and diners caught snippets of the conversation. The mention of interference, the insistence, the sharpness in Wallace's voice drew uneasy glances. A junior staff member finally whispered, "Sir, do you know who you are asking about?" Wallace frowned. "What do you mean?" The words he heard next made his stomach twist. "Franklin Russo." The manager lowered his voice, but the warning was unmistakable. "That name, you do not want to provoke him. He is not someone to cross." Wallace laughed nervously, trying to mask his growing panic. "I do not care about reputation. I need the footage. I need to know where he went." The manager's expression hardened slightly. "We cannot provide it. And if you value your safety, I suggest you leave before you make things worse." Wallace froze. A cold realization began to creep in. This was not the same man he had seen at the restaurant. Franklin Russo was someone else entirely. Someone with power and influence that reached far beyond the polished walls of a dinner table. Panic set in quickly, sharp and relentless. Wallace's fingers trembled as he pulled out his phone, dialing Jamie's number. 1 ring. 2. Voicemail. He tried again. And again. Every unanswered call tightened the coil of anxiety in his chest. He had never felt this helpless, this exposed. Next, he reached out to acquaintances he assumed could help. Friends, colleagues, people who owed him favors. Doors closed everywhere. Calls went unanswered. Messages were ignored. The world he had manipulated, controlled, and threatened seemed to have vanished. Meanwhile, Jamie sat on the edge of the bed in the safe house, finally able to breathe. Her hands rested lightly in her lap as she explained to Franklin, quietly and carefully, the reality of her life with Wallace. The isolation, the manipulation, the subtle punishments that never left marks but always reminded her who was in control. Franklin listened without interrupting. He asked no questions, offered no immediate judgment. He simply absorbed her words, nodding slowly as he processed the scope of what had been done to her. The weight of her history settled between them, acknowledged, yet not used to provoke further fear. Wallace's efforts to retaliate continued outside. He tried filing complaints against Franklin, attempting to create a paper trail that might intimidate or corner him. But each effort was dismissed or ignored. Legal doors closed with a finality that left Wallace reeling. He realized that the rules he had used to control everyone else no longer applied. Desperation clawed at him. He stationed himself near the building where Franklin had taken Jamie, watching, waiting, plotting. Every moment that passed without contact felt like a loss of control, a fracture in the carefully constructed image he maintained. Franklin, however, had anticipated this. Men stationed discreetly around the perimeter noticed Wallace's approach before he even realized he had been observed. When he tried to move closer, 2 figures stepped into his path silently but firmly, their presence enough to stop him in his tracks. "Step back," one of them said evenly, their voice carrying authority without need for aggression. Wallace hesitated, eyes flicking between the 2 men and the windows of the building. Panic surged through him again. He realized that he had underestimated not just Franklin, but the reach of the world he belonged to. Each calculated step he had taken to intimidate or threaten now seemed fragile, impotent. He stood frozen for a long moment, the cold truth settling in. The man he had humiliated at the restaurant, the one he had assumed could be challenged or dismissed, was not only untouchable, he had the means, the eyes, and the reach to make Wallace's life collapse entirely. Inside, Jamie shifted slightly, sensing the quiet change. Franklin remained calm, but his presence spoke volumes. The shift in energy, the subtle tension in the room, suggested that the danger had been identified and contained. Jamie felt a flicker of gratitude and awe. She realized that she was finally out of reach, not because of luck, but because of the careful, measured power Franklin wielded. Wallace, outside the building, realized too late that he had stepped into territory far beyond his control. He could call, demand, plead, or threaten, but nothing would yield results. Every plan he tried to execute faltered, every route of influence blocked. And when Franklin's men intercepted him on the street, guiding him back with silent precision, Wallace understood fully that he had miscalculated. The man he had thought was a stranger, a passerby, someone he could dismiss, was in fact a force that did not negotiate with fear and did not forgive recklessness. The confrontation ended with Wallace retreating, his mind spinning with the realization that he was no longer in charge of Jamie's life, that the world he thought he controlled had shifted beyond his reach. Jamie, watching from the safe house, felt the tension finally begin to ease. Franklin remained near her, vigilant but patient, giving her space to absorb the reality that she was free, at least for now. The outside storm, Wallace's panic and desperation, was contained. For the first time, she could consider what it might mean to reclaim her life. Franklin's eyes met hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement of what had just unfolded. The presence of danger remained, but it was no longer an immediate threat. Jamie allowed herself to exhale fully, realizing that she had crossed the threshold from fear to safety and that the next steps, however uncertain, would be hers to decide. The room was quiet, secured, controlled. Franklin's men had ensured that every entrance was monitored, every exit impossible without his knowledge. The faint hum of the air conditioning and the subtle shift of furniture under watchful hands were the only sounds. Jamie sat in a chair, hands folded tightly in her lap, heart hammering. She had insisted on being present. She needed Wallace to hear her voice, to know the depth of the pain he had caused. Wallace entered, his polished image intact, but the confident swagger was faltering. He scanned the room, eyes flicking over the security measures, over Franklin, and finally settling on Jamie. He opened his mouth, ready to assert dominance, to re-establish control. "She is confused," Wallace said, voice smooth but strained. "Emotional. She does not understand what she is saying. She is upset. You are manipulating her perspective." Jamie swallowed hard, gripping the arms of the chair. Her voice came trembling, but with a firmness that startled even her. "I am not confused. I am not manipulated. You hurt me. You isolated me. You made me fear everything I did, everything I said, everything I was. And I am done being silent." Wallace's lips pressed into a thin line. He attempted to regain control, leaning slightly forward. "You are exaggerating. You are letting emotion cloud your judgment. This is temporary anger. You will come to your senses." Jamie's hands shook, but she forced the words out. "No, Wallace. This is my life. And I am telling you, I do not belong to you. You do not get to decide what happens to me anymore. Your threats, your punishments, your fear, none of it has power over me now." Franklin stood nearby, silent until that moment, then stepped forward, his voice low but sharp. "Wallace Huffman, I have warned you before. Do not go near her again. You underestimate the consequences of defying that warning. One step, one attempt to control her, and you will regret it permanently." Wallace faltered. His chest heaved as he tried to reassert himself. I am her fiancé. She will listen. She will." "No," Franklin interrupted, calm but unyielding. "She will not. And you need to accept that before you do any further damage to her or yourself." Jamie watched Wallace's composure crumble. For the first time, the man who had terrified her in quiet, insidious ways now looked small, fragile, exposed. His arrogance fell away, leaving raw desperation. I never meant," Wallace began, but the words faltered. Tears pricked at his eyes, betraying the weakness he had spent years masking with rage and control. Jamie stood slowly, legs trembling but her posture straight. She did not need to speak further. The silence in the room carried the weight of everything she had endured. The truth of her words lingered, undeniable. Wallace's voice cracked again, attempts to reclaim power failing with every passing second. Franklin's eyes never left Wallace. "You will not touch her. You will not speak to her. And you will leave this place knowing that if you try, there will be consequences beyond your comprehension. Do you understand?" Wallace nodded shakily, his bravado gone, replaced by shame and fear. I understand." Jamie turned to leave, walking past him without looking back. She did not need to witness his brokenness, did not need to validate the effect she had just delivered. Every step was hers, deliberate and free. Each movement reinforced the distance she had created between herself and the man who had tried to control her life. Franklin's hand rested briefly on her shoulder as she passed, a silent acknowledgement of her courage, a reminder that she was not alone. She stepped through the doorway into the fresh air, the tension in her body easing slightly with each step. The confrontation had ended, and she had spoken. She had claimed her voice. Wallace remained behind, seated and defeated, facing the reality he could no longer manipulate. His bravado had shattered, his threats rendered meaningless, and for the first time, he had no avenue for control. The man who had dominated her life for years now faced his own powerlessness. Jamie felt a strange mixture of relief and empowerment. She had witnessed the truth of Wallace's cowardice. She had expressed what she had long been forced to suppress. And she had survived it. As she stepped further from the room, she allowed herself a long, deep breath. The air outside carried no weight of expectation, no subtle threats hidden beneath polite words. For the first time, she could exist in a space where her choices mattered, where her voice could not be silenced. Franklin followed at a careful distance, offering support but never intrusion. The world beyond the secured walls awaited, filled with uncertainty, but also possibility. Jamie walked with her head held high, each step a quiet declaration that she would no longer be defined by fear or manipulation. The confrontation had ended. The consequences had been delivered. And for the first time in years, Jamie realized she was no longer trapped in the shadow of another person's control. The mornings at Franklin's residence were quiet, almost unreal in their normalcy. Jamie had never known peace like this. No sharp words, no controlling commands, no constant tension that made every action feel scrutinized. She moved through the room slowly, testing the boundaries of this new world. Every corner seemed safe, every step deliberate, yet free. Franklin gave her space, a patient presence in the background, always ready, but never pressing. "Take your time," he had said when she asked where she could start, and for the first time in years, she felt that those words were meant for her, not layered with judgment or hidden threats. Her belongings had been retrieved efficiently, without confrontation, without the lingering threat of Wallace. Franklin had coordinated it with precision, a silent team ensuring her life could continue without interference. She unpacked her clothes, her shoes, the little things Wallace had once dictated. For the first time, she chose what she would wear, what suited her, what reflected her, not someone else's image of her. She stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair, a small, private act that felt monumental. The reflection staring back was unfamiliar in its quiet confidence. She smiled faintly, realizing she could see herself without fear, without shame. Meals became a small ritual. Jamie learned to cook in the modest kitchen, experimenting with ingredients she had once avoided because Wallace deemed them improper or unnecessary. Franklin sat nearby at the counter, silent at first, but gradually engaging in small conversation. "You've adapted quickly," he remarked one evening, stirring a cup of coffee. Jamie smiled, a little self-conscious. "I'm learning. I've never had the chance to make my own choices before." Franklin nodded, a shadow of vulnerability in his gaze. "Some choices carry risk. Some choices carry freedom. You've earned the right to both." The subtle sharing of space, the quiet conversations over meals, began to build a connection between them that was neither rushed nor forced. Chemistry emerged slowly, in the unspoken understanding that neither was trying to manipulate the other, in the shared silence that felt comfortable rather than tense. Jamie felt a sense of trust she had never experienced, the kind that allowed her to breathe deeply without bracing for impact. She began small acts of independence, journaling her thoughts, organizing her space, making plans for what she wanted to do beyond these walls. Every choice, every simple act, was a declaration of control over her own life. Yet fear lingered. A small, persistent whisper inside reminded her that dependence had always come with a cost. She glanced at Franklin one evening, a twinge of uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't want to rely on anyone like I did before," she admitted quietly. Franklin's expression softened. "You won't. I seek nothing in return. You can trust that your freedom does not come with strings attached." The relief was palpable, and for the first time, she allowed herself to truly believe it. Wallace's departure became a quiet, almost surreal event. He left town, humiliated, defeated, the weight of his own mistakes crushing the illusion of control he had built over her. Jamie felt a mixture of guilt and relief. Guilt, because a part of her had hoped he would change. Relief, because she was no longer bound to someone who had defined her existence by fear. Days passed, each one reinforcing the normalcy that Jamie had been denied for so long. Franklin encouraged her to imagine life on her own terms, to picture a future where she made her own decisions, where she was the architect of her world rather than a captive of someone else's will. Jamie began to see herself as more than a victim. She explored possibilities she had never considered, traveling, pursuing old hobbies, reconnecting with friends and family she had been forced to distance herself from. Each step was small, deliberate, yet profound. One evening, after preparing a simple dinner together, Jamie paused, watching Franklin as he quietly cleared the counter. I think I'm ready to start living again," she said, voice steady, carrying both determination and tentative hope. Franklin looked at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Then start living, Jamie. Don't let fear dictate your choices. The rest will follow." And for the first time, Jamie believed it. She was free, not only from Wallace, but from the weight of doubt and hesitation that had controlled her for years. She was discovering herself, step by step, choice by choice, and with each passing moment, she realized the strength she had never known she possessed. The nights were still quiet, the city distant beyond the walls of Franklin's residence, but Jamie felt alive in a way she had not felt in years. She could plan, dream, and imagine a life of her own making. Each day was a declaration of independence, and with Franklin's steady presence beside her, she learned that safety, respect, and autonomy could coexist. In this new life, she could breathe, could act, could simply exist without fear. The past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. She was free. Weeks passed, and each day felt like a quiet victory for Jamie. She woke with a sense of purpose that had been foreign to her for years. The fear that had shadowed every movement, every word, had begun to dissolve, replaced by a newfound confidence that came not from someone else's control, but from her own choices. Her mornings started slowly, deliberately. She brewed coffee, brewed tea, or sometimes nothing at all, whatever she wanted. She dressed in clothes she had chosen herself, experimenting with styles she liked rather than what someone else dictated. Even small decisions, once overlooked or forbidden, now felt empowering. One afternoon, sitting across from Franklin in the sunlit dining area, she spoke with a clarity that had once seemed impossible. "I've been thinking. I want to start completely over. Build my life on my terms, without fear, without compromise." Franklin studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable but calm. Then he nodded slowly. "You can. And if you need help, guidance, resources, someone to watch your back, I will be here. But I will not force you, and I will not make decisions for you. This is your life." Jamie smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "Thank you. That's more than I've ever been allowed." The permanence of Wallace's departure became increasingly clear. He had left town, his efforts to assert control thwarted at every turn. His shadow no longer loomed over her. There were no messages, no calls, no lingering threats. Each passing day without him reinforced her freedom, a weight lifting from her chest she had not realized had been there for so long. Jamie found herself thinking about Franklin more often, but not with fear or obligation. She felt drawn to him, a connection that was rooted in trust, respect, and shared understanding rather than dependency. It was a new kind of closeness, one she had never experienced before. One evening, after a quiet dinner, she spoke softly, almost hesitantly. I feel like I can trust you. And I want to. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Franklin's dark eyes softened. I want that too. And I want you to know nothing moves faster than you want it to. You set the pace. I follow. They shared a quiet moment, the kind that needed no words. A glance, a gentle brush of hands over the table, a shared silence that carried comfort, possibility, and mutual respect. It was a subtle affirmation of what could be, without pressure or expectation. Jamie thought back to that night at the restaurant, the threats, the fear, the helplessness. She realized now that her life had not ended there. That night had been the breaking point, the moment everything changed, but it was not the conclusion. It had been the beginning of something far greater, her reclamation of herself, her power, and her right to choose. The days that followed were filled with small victories. She went out on her own, met with friends she had been estranged from, and allowed herself to enjoy experiences she had once been denied. She pursued her interests without hesitation and embraced moments of joy without guilt. Every choice was a declaration of freedom, and through it all, Franklin remained at her side, steady and supportive, a presence she could rely on without feeling controlled. He offered guidance when asked, protection when needed, but never interfered with the life she was building. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the living room windows, Jamie took a deep breath and stepped out onto the balcony. The city sprawled beneath her, full of possibilities and unknowns. She felt the wind on her face, the quiet hum of life continuing around her, and for the first time, she felt fully present, fully alive. Franklin joined her, standing a respectful distance away. It's a new beginning, he said quietly. Jamie turned to him, a smile breaking across her face. It is. And it's mine. She stepped forward, letting the space between them remain open yet connected, her movements deliberate, unafraid. With Franklin by her side, she felt strength, safety, and a clarity she had never known. She was not following him, nor was she dependent. She was simply walking forward, fully in charge of her own life. The horizon stretched before her, limitless and inviting. Jamie realized that she had survived the darkest parts of her past not because of luck, but because she had found courage within herself, and because someone had respected her enough to let her reclaim it. With one final deep breath, Jamie stepped fully into her future. The fear that had once consumed her had no hold here. The shadow of Wallace Huffman had vanished completely. She had chosen freedom, and in doing so, she had chosen herself. Her life did not end at the restaurant that night. It began.